a first-year student. I'll let you, if you want to just introduce yourself a little bit, maybe where you're from and your pathway, and then we can get started with our presentation.
Yeah. So hello, my name's Aminta. I'm a first year student here at Marion. I am from Michigan, and I'm really excited to share with you guys today. And I have right now interest in OBGYN, but like I was telling them earlier, I could easily be persuaded. But yeah.
All right, thank you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Marion. We'll talk about osteopathic medicine in general, a little bit about Marion, application, applying, all of those things. And I'll be calling on Aminta throughout to sort of share her experiences as we kind of go through this presentation. And then my thought is I'll open up to any questions you might have for me. And then at the end, I'll hop off, and then that way you could just have a Q&A with our student as well. So maybe you get some more real feedback that maybe she doesn't want to share them on the screen or something. I don't know. But we'll kind of let that open at the end there too, just so you all know kind of how what we have planned for the day. Okay. So with that being said, I was just going to play a video. It's like 2 minutes. And this really just kind of goes over a little bit about Marion, some things that we're doing here, and kind of give you a sort of an overview of Marion University before we kind of get into the specifics. It was working earlier, so let's see. It's new embedded technology.
I'm sorry, is that supposed to be on audio?
I'm sorry?
Should the video have an audio?
There is music that plays, but there's no actual words. So if the audio is not working, I apologize, but there's no words going. So hopefully it works out.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's good to know. I wasn't sure if that'd come through or not, because I can hear it in my headset. So I assumed everyone could hear it. Oh, good to know. Well, okay, we'll keep playing. We're almost done.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for that, gives you a little bit of an idea of what to expect here at Marion, and in a sense, in terms of some of the resources and things that we have. As I said, we're going to go through a bunch of it, but this is a new video we got, so everyone's excited to show it, and it's kind of fun, I think, to see some of those stats and what we're doing here at Marion. And we'll kind of actually cover some of these through the presentation as we go as well. And so, oops, there we go, clicked on the wrong thing. So our mission, our mission here at MUCOM is that we want our graduates to go on and work in primary care, primary care is pediatrics, family medicine, internal medicine, and OB-GYN. And we want our graduates to also go on to work in rural or with underserved populations. So that's kind of the goal of MUCOM. Now, our students are supported no matter what specialty of interest they're interested in, right? So we'll talk about residency later, so you don't necessarily have to be interested in primary care to come to MUCOM, but just know that's kind of where we're hoping our students go, okay? And the reason this sort of came about, you can see this slide, I'm sure you've all heard, right? But there's going the projected physician shortage, right? So that's one of the reasons that we were founded back in 2010, was hoping to also address the needs of this physician shortage as well, okay? And then I am not sure how familiar all of you are with osteopathic medicine. And so I'm going to cover a little bit about that. I'll probably have our students jump in. I see another one of our students has jumped on as well, Joseph. And so, but when it comes to the similarities between osteopathic medicine or allopathic medicine, which is MDs, 4 years of med school, right? You have to pass boards. You can go into any specialty you want to, right? You can practice full rights of practice, things like that. What I normally tell people is it's basically 2 pathways to the same end goal, right? And so what's going to maybe separate the DO education from the MD education? I always say there's 2. Okay, and again, I'll call on you to maybe chime in to say you agree or if you see something else, but the first one is you see osteopathic schools always talk about this whole person approach to healthcare. You'll hear osteopathic schools talk about how patients need to have a healthy mind, body, and spirit, right? So the idea is that they're looking at not just the symptom, but the whole patient. So for instance, when I go to see my physician who's a DO, you know, they might, no matter why I'm there, they're asking me about my nutrition, my exercise, my home life, my work life, right? They're trying to get a sense of, am I just, you know, healthy and well overall? And I think both DOs and MD practitioners are doing these things, right? But DO schools are really trying to emphasize this from day one. This is how you treat patients and talk to patients. And then the other thing, which I think is the biggest thing, is osteopathic manipulative medicine, okay? So osteopathic manipulative medicine is a way to use your hands to diagnose and treat certain musculoskeletal issues, okay? And so if you've never seen OMM or never had it performed on you, or you're not sure what that is, you know, essentially that's if a patient has back pain, right? You can go to your physician, you know, both DOs and MDs can send out for imaging. They can prescribe medication. They could send referrals out to, you know, PT or something, right? But DOs are able to potentially treat that patient in themselves with their hands, right? Depending on what the issue is, right? So you're learning this whole different sort of tool, I say, that you're going to have in this toolbox that you could potentially treat your patients with, okay? Some DOs use OMM every single day. They specialize in it. Some DOs don't use it in clinical practice anymore. And then some DOs, I always say, augment their practice as best fits their patient populations. I know OB that uses OMM for his patients that have back pain or constipation issues. I know a DO pediatric oncologist that is using OMM for some of her patients that are dealing with constipation from chemotherapy side effects, right? So sometimes they find what works best with their patient populations, right? And they're able to sort of treat them more holistically without potentially medication or referring them to another practitioner. So Minta and Joseph, I don't know if you have anything you want to add about OMM or maybe what you've been learning in OMM or things like that. I see you've unmuted, so you can jump in.
Yeah, I'm sure Joseph can speak a little bit more because he's a second year. But I will say this, I just went to Marion had like this women's society meeting over the weekend, and I attended, me and a couple of medical students, as well as a few of the deans. But there was one student, she's an undergrad, and she was sharing her experience at the table. One of her siblings has had a surgery where one of the surgeons unfortunately damaged her trigeminal nerve, and it causes her younger sister to have this constant pain ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. And her sister was sharing is funny because her sister didn't know that there were several medical students at the table. But her sister was sharing how her sister came across a DO physician who introduced her to this to a OMM approach that could help relieve her pain. And her sister was saying that they just came across the DO physician about 2 years ago, and her sister has been having this pain for 6 years. But it was just, but this manipulation that she's able to do now, she can do on her own. She doesn't have to, pay for medication. She doesn't have to go to the hospital for these really expensive treatments. And so it was just really cool to hear a personal story about how someone was able to use the OMM techniques that we learn here in school to really transform their lives.
That's great. Thank you. Joseph, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Just to kind of add to what Richard was saying, here, think of OMM as a way to manipulate anatomical structures in order to induce a certain physiology. So there's it's always preached in osteopathic school that the anatomy and physiology are functionally interrelated. So you have a restriction in one, or you have a problem with one, is going to cause a problem in another. And that's essentially what we're trying to do with OMM, is saying, hey, we're going to identify this abnormality or this restriction within the anatomy and see if we can manipulate it to then induce a physiological response. So we try to do that with our hands as much as we can. If we can avoid medications, then that's the best route to go. However, there are some things that we can't really avoid using medicational approaches to. So it's just really an adjuvant. It's something you can add to your practice to make you a better physician overall. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. And I should add, if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourselves if you have any questions, and we'll answer them that way too. Okay. Whoops. And then in terms of osteopathic medicine, the main takeaway from this slide is really that over a quarter now, I think, of all medical students are going to an osteopathic medical school. So the profession itself is continuing to grow, and that more DOs are going into more specialties than they ever used to before, right? I think most DO schools, they still have the mission of primary care, right? But you have DOs in every specialty that you can think of these days. Okay. All right, and then the next slides on are really going to be Marian specific. So we're going to talk a little bit about Marian University, what our curriculum's like, our clinical rotations, things of that nature. And then I'm going to get into the application cycle as well. That way, if anyone's looking to join or get into the application soon. And then we do have a question in the chat box, so I'll look at that real quick. It says, what factors do you look for in out-of-state students? So we are a private, not-for-profit university. While the majority of our students are from the state of Indiana, and I think last year we were at, let me see, I actually have that map in front of me. We were at 68% Indiana last year, which is actually the largest we've ever had from the state of Indiana. The years before, at least 3 or 4, we were around 55 to 57%. But so we are not really as concerned about your address or where you're from. Now, being in Indiana, right, we get a lot of Indiana applications and a lot of Indiana students that choose to come here. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're from Michigan or California or wherever, right? We're still accepting students from all of those places. So hopefully that helps answer that question a little bit. And then I'll get in towards the end of the presentation too, like what we think could make you more competitive, right? It's not just about hitting the minimums on things, right? But what are we looking for outside of metrics and stuff like that too? So no, I'll try and cover some of that too today. And then our curriculum, let me see, we got in the chat real quick. Oh, you're welcome. So for our chat, or for our curriculum, I always say we have a systems-based curriculum, okay? And we'll actually show you what that looks like, and we'll cover that more in depth, right? But you can see here, it says integrated biomedical sciences and clinical medicine, right? So for the most part, you're going to be getting both the biomedical sciences and the clinical skills, right? The clinical medicine all at the same time. And so it's this integrated approach. When we were founded in 2010, they decided on a systems-based report because of something called the Carnegie Report in 2010. And it found that students were more successful in their third and fourth year if they went through a systems-based curriculum. So that's ultimately why we landed on using that curriculum specifically. There's early clinical lectures and engagement. And so in terms of early clinical lectures and engagement, you get a lot of sort of simulated clinical experiences in first year and second year. That could be with both your peers, that could be with standardized patients, which are actors we have come in and present symptoms to you, which our students start to utilize at the end of their first year. And then there's also one called Harvey, which is a human patient simulator that they'll start using first year, second semester. That's sort of a robot that's known for detailed cardiovascular and lung sounds, okay? And then we also send students on interprofessional healthcare experiences, where the idea is that you're getting exposed to a wide range of healthcare. So it's not just a physician. You could be with nursing teams, you could be with nutrition teams, OT, PT, right? So you're seeing how the healthcare works as a team. And I know Aminta's been out to Ascension for her interprofessional healthcare experience. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I just did my visit like about 2 weeks ago. It is required for all of the first year students to attend a certain amount of hours minimum. But essentially the goal, like Richard said, is to go into the hospital setting and essentially see that the different perspectives of your entire care team. You know, a lot of your third and fourth year, you know, you're going to be doing your rotations with the physicians, but your care team is so much just bigger than just the physicians. And so for me, I got to spend the day working around with the nurses and the patient care techs. I myself was a patient care tech. So for me, because I did have the experience, I was able to be a little bit more hands-on with the patients. And so we worked along together, and they just kind of took me alongside their day as we completed all the tasks that they needed to do, which is really cool. But also it just does give you that early clinical experience if that's something that you don't have. A lot of my classmates have never had clinical experience. And so for them, it was really helpful and just really knowledgeable to go into the hospital setting and see kind of the different aspects that work into taking care of a patient.
Great, thank you for that. And then Joseph, I don't know if you want to share your experiences as well as a second year, if y'all are doing the same things and where you've been.
Yeah, so we've done a couple of these now, and this is really an opportunity for med students to see the interdisciplinary approach to providing care for patients. And how Aminta was saying here is, like a second ago when she was talking, a lot of students will have come into medical school or applied to medical school, and they've shadowed physicians, or they've had like a very isolated look at what the healthcare system is, and what this program that they're starting with Marion is, and trying to develop a little bit more, is putting you in a position where you're helping to take care of patients, and you're interacting with a plethora of different hospital staff to actually see what all their roles are and to see how you're doing it. So it's designed to kind of help you transition into clinicals a little bit more, and allow you to gain an appreciation for the other staff that you'll be working with.
Great, thank you. And then introduction to clinical medicine is a course that's the course you're really learning all those medical skills, right? And I'll kind of touch on what that looks like when we actually get to the curriculum slide. But that's the course that you're going to be getting a lot of that early clinical simulated experiences as well. And then the professional identity formation series, that's brand new. Just started in its last semester was the first year that it was more of a actual course and not just something we were doing. But I won't go through necessarily all of these, right? But the main point is that they were trying to think of something that could help our students in unique ways, right? And so not just about medicine, but ways they can have professional or personal growth, okay? And so you can kind of see all these things here, but the PIF, we call it PIF, P-I-F, right? Not the prettiest name, but it's shorter than saying Professional Identity Formation Series. So PIF is all 4 years, and it's just 1 day a month that they have it, and it covers all 4 years, right? The only other course we have that's all 4 years is our Osteopathic Principles in Practice, or the OMM course that you're going to have, right? So it is something they found that they thought would help our students, whether it's preparing for boards or residency, becoming leaders in the field. I know they'll do things, financial seminars and things as well for students, right? And it's also things that you can use towards your residency application later, okay? And then you can see our ideas that we want to have these leaders in the field, or transformational leaders, that is what we say here. And there's 5 pillars, right? And so they're trying to address all of these pillars with our students, right, as you go through this series. So one's wellness, both academic and student mental wellness, right? So it's not just about doing well in the program. It's also about meeting your needs mentally, physically, and then as well as when you're outside as a physician, okay? Academic success, right? Focusing on lifelong learners. We are career development and planning, okay? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So focusing on culturally competent care. Again, and then really becoming leaders in the field, right? So that's what we're hoping this PIF series does, is help develop all of our students in these sort of five areas, okay? So, and again, that just started last year. And so the students are doing that once a month. I think they just had one, was it yesterday? You just had a PIF series. So, and did first and second years do it together? Or do you do it separate? I'm going to just ask you now. No,
Yeah,
separate.
It was separate. Yeah.
Okay, see, there you go. And I think the idea is that it addresses different needs. The further along you go, there's different needs in different areas that they can help you grow to get to those next stages. So. And then this is your actual curriculum for the first 2 years here at Marian University. First semester, you can see, is not systems based. It is, I say, setting that foundation or that backbone to help you get through the rest of the curriculum. So scientific foundations of medicine, we say, is like all of your undergrad science classes put into a 19-week semester, okay? Essential clinical anatomy and development. We do have an anatomy lab where you'll do full dissection, about a 6-to-1 student to donor ratio, okay? And they're in the anatomy lab 2 to 3 days a week in that first semester. They get a lot of time with dissection. And then Osteopathic Principles in Practice 1. So again, that's learning osteopathic manipulative medicine. And then Introduction to Clinical Medicine 1. And I always say first semester is really helping you with that foundation, right? How do you take a proper patient history and physical exam? How do you do proper documentation with your SOAP notes, right? Things like that. Some of those skills that are really needed, right? And to have that strong backbone. And then going into spring, you start systems based. So cardiopulmonary and renal systems. So those of you that were on earlier, you heard Aminta say they were starting the pulm system, right? Pulmonology, which would mean Joseph's in his what we call GYM, so gastroenterology or gastrointestinal endocrine and metabolism. And then let's say they're doing the cardiovascular system in lecture, right? OPP and ICM also try and follow along with those same systems as much as possible. So you're getting that hands-on skills that correlates with what you're learning in lecture. And let's say instead of at ICM, that routine history and physical, when you're in the cardiovascular system, now it might be, what are the questions you ask someone with the history of cardiovascular disease? What physical exam skills would you need? What labs would you order? What imaging, right? To help you get to that proper diagnosis and treatment plan, okay? And they'll use human patient simulators. Mostly it's Harvey, that one I said that's for detailed heart and lung sounds in first year. And then they'll use each other as fake patients, and then they'll start using standardized patients by the end of first year, which are those actors we have come in and present symptoms to you as well. And I know Aminta, we were talking about how you were in the Pulm series, but do you want to just talk about a little bit about what you've done in ICM and sort of how the lecture series and the ICM series kind of work together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really enjoy how the curriculum is merged together. So for example, I'll go back. So we just finished learning about hematology. So all of our lectures, we're all focused on more so the pathophysiology, the genetics, all of that stuff in terms of the diseases that you're going to see in clinic. And then our ICM class, so our clinical medicine class, was essentially then taking all of that knowledge and how we're going to apply it in a clinical manner, which was really, really nice because it was like, okay, I was like, okay, now I understand why this happens, and now I can understand the presentations that I'm going to see in my patient. And then we also like do a practice of, you know, how we're going to follow up, what medications we would give, what OMM treatment we would use that would help with that if that's necessary, and things like that. And then of course in OMM, right now we're doing pulmonology, so we're learning different practices that can help with like COPD patients. So it all merges really nicely together.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we won't go through every system, but just know that's kind of how your entire, you know, from second semester on are going to work, right? You can see all the systems there, right? And they've tried to pair systems that sort of go together as well. So, you know, with the heart and lungs and the kidneys, they say you can't really talk about one without the other. And so they've tried to pair systems that also flow together well too. Okay. And then in terms of third and fourth year, right? So what they call clerkship years, also known as clinical rotations, okay? Third year, you can see you will do every single one of these rotations. You just might not do them in this order, okay? And you're going to do about 75% of your rotations within a 60-mile radius of Marian University. So for the most part, when you come to MUCOM, you're going to stay local. If we send you outside of that 60-mile radius, we do have housing provided for you close to the clinical site, okay? And so it's kind of a nice perk. And then fourth year, you can see it's mostly selectives and electives, and that's there to really give you flexibility. If you're out of state, to set up rotations out of state. You can't do all of them out of state, right? But you can set up 3 or 4, something like that. And it also allows you the flexibility to try and set up rotations where you'd like to match to residency to hopefully increase your chances of interviewing and matching there as well. Okay, so that's some of the reasons fourth year is a little more open. We do have an entire clinical education team here that helps you, so you're not necessarily going to navigate this on your own. Okay. And Joseph, I don't know, have you heard anything about third year rotations yet? I don't know if y'all have started there, but they used to have them submit rank lists. So they still doing that? And you're muted, by the way.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, so we just went through the survey, which essentially it kind of asked about any specific obligations you have, any specific dates that you have, like your own wedding, or you have something super important coming up. If you have any family near any of the like regional rotations, like such as like Terre Haute or South Bend or Goshen, and then you essentially organize everything for your first semester and say, hey, during the first 3 months, I want to do like surgery and OB-GYN. And then the second 3 months, I want to do family med, internal med. And then the last set of months, I want to do like these rotations. And they try to match that as best as possible with the survey and how you would like preference with what you're doing. So for example, I chose to do my surgery rotations first. So hopefully I get that, because I'd rather focus on anatomy at the beginning and refresh all of my anatomy and then go through clinical application on my future rotations. And I thought that that'd just be a better fit for me personally. And Marian's support team really tries to take all of your preferences into account, especially with those regional locations. Even though if you're in a regional location, they provide the housing for you. They just presented to us that students will be assigned to regional rotations anywhere between 3 and 6 months out of the year. So you can have a decent amount of clinical regional.
Looks like we lost them. Well, we'll cycle back. And then I got a question, which is, what does the clinical colloquium mean? The colloquium is essentially So the whole cohort does that together. It's here on campus, and it's really just preparing you for your clinical rotations, right? So expectations, right? What to expect at a clinical site, what to expect from preceptors, things you'll need like evaluations, we also do exams at the end of your core rotations as well in third years. And so I think they go over some of those things and timelines and things like that. We also have what we call just-in-time trainings, where you'll break off based on the specialty you're going into first, and then they do more additional training to help you prepare for that as well. So that's kind of what the colloquiums are. They're meant to just get you prepped and ready for your rotation year. So hopefully that helps answer that question. It looks like Joseph might be back. Do you have anything else to add, or I don't know when you cut off, but
Oh, did I cut off? I'm sorry, I didn't.
you cut off just when you were done talking about how you'll be doing, 3 months or
Like,
6 months
yeah,
or so out of.
yeah, okay, yeah, that's pretty much all I was saying. And then just to
Okay.
add to the colloquium, like during your first 2 years, you're learning medicine the entire time, but you're not really learning about like hospital dynamics or the order that you need to go through, or exactly how to order labs, or like little things that you kind of learn with a hands-on basis once you get into a hospital. And that's what the colloquium is designed to help you do. It's to introduce you to all these things to where you're not just a sitting duck that doesn't know how to do anything when you enter into your third year rotations. So they try to like speed up that transition process.
Great, thank you. So are there any other questions about third or fourth year rotations before we move on a little bit to more admissions related stuff? I don't see in the chat box. I don't see anyone unmuting themselves, so we'll keep moving on. All right, so research opportunities. So the main takeaway is just to know that we are a DO school that has research opportunities. We have 3 different labs that our faculty do research at. One is right here in the Evans Center, which is our sort of medical school building. Okay, it's called the Evans Center. And we have one across campus in a different building. And then we have one close to downtown Indianapolis in a biomedical sciences building, and we rent space in there, right? And it's a really nice building. It's brand new. I think it just came online like 2 years ago. And it's also, we share space with like biomedical sciences, like private companies and stuff that have research labs in there. It's really nice space. So the research interest has continued to grow both in our faculty and students, and because of that, that's why we've reached out to actually having that shared space or that rented space now and close to downtown Indy. Okay, and we have both bench and clinical research opportunities, right? And you don't always do research with our faculty. We actually have clinicians and other hospital partners that reach out to us specifically to try and get our students to help with research projects, okay? I knew at one point at least 3 students doing research at Riley Hospital for Children in their HEMONC department. 2 were with oncologists, and then 1 was with a neuro-oncologist. And so, and they had reached out to connect with Marion, right? And then I've students doing clinical research at Cincinnati St. Vincent. I think some done at Community. And so just know that it's not all contained within Marion. Some of the research happens with our clinical partners and other people as well, okay? And then in terms of residency, so every year is a little different, right? So the class of 2022, we had a 99% placement rate. Class of 2021 had 97%, and the class of 2020 had 100% placement rate. So we tend to be pretty strong in the match. For those of you that maybe aren't familiar with what we're talking about when it comes to matching, right? After medical school, so after 4 years of med school, you then have to apply and interview and do this whole match list, right? When it comes to applying to residency. But going to residency is how you essentially become that physician in that specialty that you're interested in, right? And so we had 64% going to primary care. Again, that's our mission, so we say it's a very good thing. This class had 20 different specialties they went into though, right? So 4 of those 20 are primary care, so 16 others are non-primary care. 71% matched in Indiana and surrounding states. We're a Midwest school with a lot of Midwest students, so it makes sense that we have such a large presence here in the Midwest, okay? you can see top specialties there, but outside of primary care, we had anesthesiology and emergency medicine. Okay. If you ever go to our website, we have a list. You can see an entire list of all specialties plus a map of the US of where they all place. There's a lot more info on our website too. I'll share our email at the end. If anyone wants to reach out by email, I can share all that stuff too through PDF and all that as well. Okay. But just know there's a lot more info on the website. Okay. But typically we're pretty strong. This year's match is March 17th. So come that next week, we'll have all the updated stuff for the class of 2023 as well. Okay. All right, a little bit about admissions. Okay, and so if you've never applied or you're looking to apply this upcoming cycle, right? So this is kind of the steps you go through. All right. So the COMAS application is the first step. If you're familiar with AMCAS, which is for MD applications, a COMAS is the equivalent for DO schools. Okay, so it's one centralized application that will go out to all the DO schools that you decide to apply to. Okay, and then once we get your apps, we pre-screen them to make sure you meet our minimum requirements. So we have a 3.0 minimum cumulative GPA and a 494 on the MCAT. Okay, I will talk more about our student profiles and averages coming up. From there, if you meet our minimums, you will get a supplemental application. We ask short answer questions, different things like that on there. There's a $100 fee associated with our supplemental application. Just know that if you do get a fee waiver from a COMAS, which is where they'll waive your application fee, we will waive your supplemental fee. All right, so we get that question a lot, and just note that we do waive those fees. Once we screen your application, you can be either invited to interview or we can let you know that you weren't invited for interview. So there's essentially two things that could happen. We interview starting in September. Our last interview day this year and last year at the end of March, just so you know. So we're September to March in terms of interview dates. And we start handing out class seats immediately, right? So our first interview date for this cycle, I believe, if I remember correctly, was September 2nd or 3rd, whatever that Friday was. And that very next week, we started giving out offers of admissions and class seats, okay? So we are rolling admissions. So it is advantageous to apply early in the cycle, just because we have more interview spots, we have more class seats, right? Like right now, we're still reviewing apps for our March interview dates, right? But when there's less spots available, it gets just more and more competitive to get those remaining spots. So for most schools that have rolling admissions, when they say you need to apply early, it's not that applying late in and of itself is a detriment, but it's because it gets so much more competitive the further along in the cycle we get. Okay, so something to keep in mind when you're looking to apply. A COMAS will open up on May 5th. Okay, and that's when you can start applying to schools. And then after interview, you go to the admissions committee and you could be offered admission, you could be put on the wait list, or you could be not offered a seat or declined. Okay, so those are kind of a general overview in terms of what the application process looks like. Okay, and this just, right, we'll start getting apps in May. Deadline is technically February 1st, right? But we're constantly reviewing apps, interviewing, sending out class seats, just the whole thing throughout the entire cycle. Okay. I won't cover these much. They're on the web. With a pretty traditional pre-med, prereqs, right? We do require biochem, but not with lab. But I know not every medical school requires that. But just, you know, they're listed here. If you have any questions about course equivalencies, just reach out to us at the email I'll share at the end. Okay. Okay, so this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about what we look for in an application, right? So I know what I said, our minimums are a 3.0 and a 494, but you can see that our average GPA is a 3.71 and our average MCAT is a 504. Now there is a wide range within that, okay? So it doesn't mean that if you don't have a 504 or a 3.7, you can't get accepted. That's not the case, all right? And then you can see amount of apps versus interviews and all of those things at the top, right? So outside of just looking at academic metrics, right, in and of itself, we are going to get into trends and grades, right? So you could have two applicants with, let's just say, a 3.3, right? Maybe one got a 2.9 freshman year, and then since then they've been working hard and it's all A's and B's, mostly A's towards senior year, right, with this upward trend. right, that person has a good shot of getting an interview because we see an upward trend and we see growth. The other person with the 3.3, they might have C's all 4 years, C's in the upper level sciences, right? And even though they both have a 3.3, one is more likely to get an interview than the other, okay? We do pay close attention to how students are doing in their upper class their upper division science courses, right? And so those are things we're going to pay attention to. It's not just what's that GPA, it's all the stuff that goes in, the more of the fine details within that, okay? We're also going to look to see if you have any graduate work, post-bac work, things like that. And then with the MCAT, it's the same thing. We're going to look at your subsections to make sure, what do those look like, right? What are your highest sections, right? You could have a 500, but you could have a 121 BBFL, and that's still going to be a concern to the committee because the science, the biology section is very low, right? So we're also going to start looking into some of those things too. And then outside of just academics, we really like to see volunteerism. So we like to see that you're involved in your community, right? So we look for what does your volunteer community service look like? We are going to look at what sort of clinical exposures do you have, paid or voluntary. We're going to look at shadowing. We are going to look at extracurriculars and leadership. So we are looking for all of these things, right? None of that is required, but you can see we get almost 5,000 apps, right? So these are the things that are going to maybe help you like separate yourself from the other applications, right? That's when we start getting into our mission, right? We were looking for students that want to serve underserved or rural communities. So what have you been doing as a pre-med to also serve that might show that you align with our mission a little bit, things like that, right? We do understand due to COVID, there has been issues getting or gaining some of these opportunities, and we are aware of that, and we do keep that in mind, but we do still expect to see some type of experiences or exposures, okay? And again, a lot of that comes down to just the sheer competitiveness of medical school, right? If you've got 2 apps and one's got experience and one doesn't, right? And you have to make those determinations. That's where some of these things can really help make you more competitive to med school later, okay? Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Silence, we'll move on. Okay. Do y'all have anything to add about anything I've talked about so far, Minta or Joseph, what you think about in terms of being prepared for med school, what could help you stand out, things that you did?
So just kind of what you were saying there, we look at each school's mission statement and figure out exactly what they stand for and really make sure that this school is going to be a good fit for you if you're going to use money to apply for that school. Like what I did in undergrad, I did a lot of work with like an elderly population that was in long-term care facilities. I did a lot of work with underprivileged like elementary school students. I did a lot of work with different in need populations, and that Marion statement really resonated with me, and that's the reason why I chose to go with this school. So when you're researching schools, make sure that you know the mission statements, make sure that they are going to reflect why you want to go into medicine, because that's going to maximize your chances of getting an interview to that program and therefore getting accepted into that program. So
Yep, good point. Aminta, do you have anything to add? And you don't have to, I'm just asking.
No, I would definitely agree with Joseph. I actually did the same. When I went through my schools, I was actually basing them off of mission statements first before I applied. Yeah, no, I just agree.
Perfect. Thank you. I like it. And then we had a question in the chat box, which was, what do we think about research in undergrad? That is also something we do look at. I always say research is something that is good on an application, but if you don't have research, it's not gonna hurt your application in a negative way, if that makes sense. So having research can definitely be a positive, but it's not a negative if you don't have research, okay? So I don't want you to be like, I'm gonna go out and do a research project because I have to. That's not the case, right? Do something that you're maybe more aligns with what you're interested in, or you're gonna get more out of than just doing something because you think you need to check a box, if that makes sense. So.
can I talk about that really quick?
Yeah,
Richard?
sure.
On that research point, everyone's application is going to look different when you're doing like when you're preparing it for medical school. And if research isn't the way that you want to give back to the community, or you want, you're like really passionate about, then it's not necessarily needed. And if you have a lot of community involvement and you're showing, I'm really passionate about this subset of the community, I really want to go back and help this subset of the community, and that's part of your overarching story for wanting to go to medical school and is a big part of your personal statement, that's still going to go and work wonders for you in terms of the application process. So really prioritize your time and say, what do I care about the most, and what do I want to get out of these experiences that would then make me a better physician in the future. And then if research is going to help you with that, and if you have a clinical research opportunity, or you have something that allows you to dive into the sciences a little bit more and it's applicable to medicine and you want to do that, then that's great. But make sure that you're in it for the right reasons and you're not just doing random research just to beef up your application. So make sure it's cohesive with the story that you want for yourself in terms of your application.
Great, thank you. All right, I know we've only got about, let's see, we got a question. Oh, Joseph probably says you're welcome. All right. So I know we've only got about 13-ish minutes left, so I'll try and go through the rest of these, not super fast, but a little bit. That way I make sure I have time for at least a little Q&A at the end, if not for me, at least for the students, okay? And we're almost done too, so I'm not going to skip that much. In terms of financial aid, we are a private not-for-profit school, which I had mentioned earlier. So you can kind of see at the bottom there is our tuition, right? Cost of attendance is what we say is tuition plus housing, car payment, groceries, right? Living expenses, all of those things, right? So that's what a university's cost of attendance is. So how do you pay for that, right? Some of you might be familiar with FAFSA already. So a lot of students here use FAFSA, which, excuse me, only covers $20,500 a year. So then most students use Graduate Plus loans, which is also run through the government. And then there's unsubsidized, think like private loans, bank loans, things like that, okay? And so every student that I know personally was FAFSA and Grad Plus. My wife is a DO, went to a private school. We also use FAFSA and Grad Plus. So I understand the debt burdens all of you might be calculating in your heads right now. You know, no matter, for the most part, most schools, you're going to take on some debt. And so we do have some scholarships available. Just note that if you get in that application process and you get further, we can talk more about some of that stuff, but I don't want to take up too much time about that at this stage. But no, there are some limited scholarships that we have available. And then there's things outside, National Health Service Corps, military, if you're interested in that, there's women in medicine scholarships, all sorts of things like that, okay? And then there's a question, do we have financial advisors for medical schools that are not financial aid? So for the most part, you interact with our financial aid officers or the associate director of financial aid. And then I know they have had outside people come and talk about finances and how to best prepare and pay off your loans and things like that. So they do touch on that, but that's more of, we have outside speakers come in to do some of those things. Okay. Month-to-month expenses or taxes, etc. I don't know. That might be good for a student. I think when you get your aid, they're trying to take into account all of those things. But Joseph, I see you unmuted yourself there.
Yeah, so you can talk for those specifically. I guess your question is a two-part question. For month-to-month expenses or taxes help or anything when you're in school and you're talking about like T98s and everything that you're getting back for scholarships or loans, financial aid advisors are going to be the people to go to. They can help you break down your budget. They can help you break down exactly how much loans you need to take out, and then help you if you took out too much and it's at the beginning of the semester. They can also help remedy that and send some of that money back to where then your loans are reduced a little bit. So they can help you find that perfect sweet spot of how much I need to take out, and so I don't owe interest on that going on. Now, if you're talking about the finances once you're out of medical school, I think Marion has a few like outside positions and outside like accountants that come in throughout the later parts of the curriculum that then kind of give a little bit of advice with that in terms of managing money, managing school repayments and stuff like that. So I hope that kind of answers your questions for that.
Perfect. Thank you. We do have a biomedical sciences master's program. The real takeaway from this, that if you're looking to have a gap between undergrad and med school, or if you think you need to improve on your application in some way, just know we have this BMS program, and it does have a linkage to our DO program as well. So if you get a 3.5 in this program and you have at least a 497 on the MCAT, you're guaranteed an interview to our DO program. Okay. But like I said, if anyone has questions about some of these things, reach out. We can go more in depth, but I want to keep an eye on our time here because I know we're running short. We went through all of this. We don't need to talk about important dates. Let's see. The main takeaway from this school, or this slide, we are a smaller school, about 4,000 total students, graduate and undergrad. I think something we do well is student wellness. Okay. We have a mental health counselor available for free for all students. We have our mental health counseling office. It's not just one person. We have a director of student wellness and groups where she is looking at having different wellness activities throughout the semester. We have a fitness center available for free. You get a faculty mentor, you get an upper class mentor, and we really foster collaboration and working together and study groups and all of those things. Okay. So just know that at Marian, the idea is that we all work together and we help each other. We have open door policy with faculty. I know a faculty member that plays tennis with the students on the weekends, right? So you're going to get to know your faculty well, staff well, and your classmates really well. Okay. And the idea is that you all help each other. Okay. And all right, last slide. So does anyone have any questions for me about anything? If not, like I said, I'd like to jump off just to give you some free time there with just our students to ask whatever you'd like. Let's see, we got one in the chat box. Do you have an OMM program for medical students that can be teaching assistants? So we do have an OMM honors program, and it looks like Joseph's saying yes. So maybe I'll let you jump into that a little bit more when I jump off. But know that we do have an honors program where they can help, second years can help first years. But Joseph will touch on that when I jump off in case there's any other admissions related questions for me about anything. All right, we'll give you 30 more seconds while I say my goodbyes. So again, I just want to thank everyone for being here today, for coming learn more about Marian and our osteopathic medical school. Like I said, reach out to me at this email address if you have any questions about anything, want more in-depth information about some of the slides that I had. I'm happy to reach out to you and talk to you there. I don't see any more questions, so I will say goodbye. I'll turn it over to our two students to give you all a little bit of a Q&A session. And Paola, thank you, or Paola, thank you for having me and letting us be here today.
Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Nussel. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And everyone have a great evening.
All right.
Okay, so to kind of speak on the OMM program, so we do have an OMM honors program that you can apply for second year. It's like a essay-based application that you can kind of go through. And if you're selected, then you're essentially serving as a TA, so a table trainer or a table like assistant, and you're helping the first years learn and modify their techniques to be correct, essentially. And on top of that, you also enroll in this course, and every week you have a meeting to talk about advanced OMT techniques or talk about techniques that you might not feel as confident about because we didn't have enough time in class to really explore those areas. So I'm in that program personally, and I love it. And I think that it's a very good thing that they offer here at Marian for that. If you're interested in like elevating your OMM education.
Okay, so
Oh, I thought.
someone asked a question in the group chat. The person said, I'm a previous Marian undergrad student and went to a different master's school, I guess. Would that be a hindrance?
I don't think that would be a hindrance. I think just as long as you really excelled in your master's program, that's really all that they would be looking for in terms of your master's. And honestly, I always encourage, with location also brings diversity, brings a different aspect of what you can bring. So no, that wouldn't be a problem at all.
And most of our students that are accepted actually aren't from Marion. They're from like universities all throughout Indiana. So the fact that you didn't go to Marion for the master's program really shouldn't be a hindrance for you at all, especially if you went to that school for a specific program because you were interested in it. That I don't see how that can be work against you or anything at all for your application. So. We don't have any more questions right now. So I wanted to speak on the student culture really quick. Some medical schools are really competitive and it's a dog eat dog culture. People are trying to stand out and they're trying to be the best in their class, and Marion's really not like that at all. A lot of students are sharing resources with each other. We're helping each other out as much as we possibly can. We're all in this together. Osteopathic schools have a unique challenge of presenting the exact same curriculum that allopathic schools, so MD schools, present, and an additional course every single semester with osteopathic medicine. So you're going to have an increased course load than most allopathic schools will have in terms of that, because you're learning the same information and then some. And all the professors here and all the instructors are amazing. They have open office hours. Literally, you shouldn't be scared of a single person. Just walk in, introduce yourself and say, hey, I have a question, and you can sit there and talk to them for 3 hours and I really won't mind. They're here to help you out and they don't look at it any differently. So that's one thing that I truly do appreciate about this like medical program is the faculty here and the other students.
Yeah, I'll just feed off of that real quick. Like you said, I did my undergrad at the University of Connecticut, and then I also did my master's at the University of Michigan. And of course, those are very, very big schools. I will say, I have found that being at a smaller school has been extremely helpful in terms of my education and my mental health here. My professors, like the relationships that we have built because I've gone to their office hours, they'll just stop me in the hallway and they'll be like, hey, like, how are you doing? I'm like, oh, I did good on the test. And they're like, no, like, I want to know, like, how are you doing? So if you're that type of person who really values those relationships with your professors, this is just a wonderful school for that. And then Richard did mention a little bit about our mental health services here. Whether or not you are interested in Marion or any other school, I don't know if you're like me, but anytime I had a question that I could ask a medical student during my interviews, my question was, how do you avoid burnout? I was so absolutely terrified of burnout, still am terrified of burnout. And the one thing that Marion really did address, and I really feel very comfortable here, is that they truly do care about your mental well-being. And like they said, the mental health services here are free. I, at first, was very hesitant. I've never been to therapy, but med school will expose all of your stresses in a way that you've never even imagined. And I really wanted to prioritize myself because I love medicine so much that I did not want this to become a thing that I started to hate because of how it affected my well-being. So I now go to therapy and it has been absolutely wonderful. A good chunk of my class is in therapy. I'm sure same for Joseph's class as well. So if you take anything from this, I would like to give is whenever you move further along your educational pathway, like definitely this pathway is really, really tough. So just make sure to take care of yourself too.
So, and then we have a question in chat. So I don't know, I'm not all the way through the curriculum yet. I'm just second year. I don't know of anything that deals with grief specifically. They might have some presentations with it while you're in your third and fourth year. However, one thing that Richard did not talk about that Marion has that's kind of unique is something called meaningful medicine. And you're essentially paired up with a community physician. And Dr. Young here, she's faculty and she kind of runs this program. And you explore all the humanistic values to providing care. So you look at different diverse populations. You look at all the difficulties in providing care. You look at the difficulties in making sure that patients are actually going through their care, or how different income levels are going to affect their compliance with the care that they're going through. And I could definitely suggest to her that she brings in a outside speaker to kind of tackle grief in the medical field, because I think that that's actually a really good point that we haven't really got taught yet up to this point in the curriculum, but I can't speak that they don't teach that at all in the third and fourth year, especially in those clinical rotations. That's probably something that most medical schools kind of leave to those third and fourth years. So when you're put in that situation, the preceptors and the physician that you're working under during your clinical rotations. But I think that the Meaningful Medicine program, that's a way that they could actually go to help medical students out in those situations. So I appreciate that question. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. It is 6:01 on my, well, 6:02 now on my clock. And does anyone have any lingering question before we close? Okay, thank you for all the comments. I do think you guys did great. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for everyone who came out. I hope you learned a lot, and good luck on your medical journeys. And yeah, good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.